All right, hopefully you can see the screen. Put it in presenter view. All right, so let's go ahead and rock and roll. Today we're going to be focused on chapter 13, which is on actually event planning and wedding. So hopefully you had a second to take a look at the at that supplemental, which is really what's written in chapter 13, my approach is I constantly update. So I don't constantly update the book, but I constantly update the thinking as we go. So anyway, so that supplemental, you'll have seen some similarities, of course, to what you read in the book, but there's also some differences. So hopefully that helped you and added context as well. Hold on for just 1 second. And sometimes. All right. So let's go ahead and rock and roll here. Um, Ironically enough, today, the reason we're doing this, I mentioned it in class, is I'm in Florida, near Jupiter, Florida right now. My daughter is getting married tomorrow, so our discussion about event planning and weddings is like amazingly fortuitous in terms of timing. I think it's kind of funny, actually. Just kind of worked out this way in terms of where the curriculum fell and when she scheduled her wedding. So that's pretty cool. So just real quickly, event planning, big picture is what we're really focused on here. And event planning can be lots of things. In a corporation, event planning can be corporations or companies planning events for their employees. It can be for planning events like go-to-market events where you're bringing in clients or prospective clients for events, right? So it can both be kind of an employee benefit event. It can also be a client in a sales or marketing event to try to drive sales and marketing, right? But certainly the reason what you're going to hear today, what we're going to talk a lot about today is really going to be focused on weddings as the example. And the reason is I do this is more from a teaching standpoint, I think, since almost not everybody's going to work in an event planning shop in a big company. If you're in marketing, there's probably a higher chance that you're going to do that. If you're like in accounting and finance, maybe not so much, but that's okay. Maybe you'll find your way there. But more people do get married at some point. So I'm using the wedding as the example. But what I invite you to do today is really think about it. We're going to be talking about weddings as example, but seek to apply it to other events that you may be involved in. Okay. So that's what we're going to do today. Hopefully you read what needed to be read. That's what we're going to cover today in the class. We're also going to do an in-class assignment that we will do here today. We'll do that actually after the break. So also um, one of the I'm going to ask you for next time what is due is the video innovation and the stove burn challenge. It is somewhat related to weddings and events, but it's really focused on innovation and innovation related to events or other things in your life. So anyway, it's a very short video, but I think you'll appreciate it, and especially as you're thinking about applying it to innovating in terms of planning a wedding, planning an event, etc. Okay, so now next week also, we have our home buying group assignment will be due. Okay, so that will be that we're going to be presenting that in class. As a reminder, we are going to have a group, three realtors. Two are from Harrisonburg area. One is from Northern Virginia. They're friends of mine, people that I've worked with before. Some of them have presented to the classes. But the way it's going to work is, last week I shared with you how how it's going to work in terms of the project. But next week, when you actually present it to the class, they're going to be there to give you feedback. And trust me, they are friendly. You should want to present to them because they're going to be able to give you direct feedback, direct from a realtor, and realtors do this stuff. They facilitate home buying all the time. So as much as I'm as your professor, I can help you with that. And I've bought and sold many, many houses in my life. Hearing it directly from the pro like them is going to be great. So I feel very blessed and fortunate that they agreed to join us. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. So anyway, so come ready, work with your team, your one, two, or three other people that you're working with in total, and we'll be ready to do that next week. But what I did want to ask, last week we assigned partners, so hopefully you guys have had a chance to meet as a team. Also, I asked in my follow-up email to email me if you still needed a partner. I did get a couple emails, so I did made some assignments. Does anybody still need a partner is my question now. Does everybody have their partners? Or maybe do it this way. If you don't have a partner, like email me or whatever, and I will figure out. But I think the bottom line is you need to figure this out if you don't have a partner. So anyway, if you don't have a partner, would you like do a thumbs up or put something to let me know, if you would?
Professor,
Okay. I'm not seeing any thumbs ups. So am
Professor,
I? Okay. So good. So everybody kind of we went. I'm not going to relitigate that. We walked through the whole thing last week. Certainly, if you have questions, let me know. But I think you know what you need to do. Okay. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. All right. I think I'm going to jump right in. Okay. So today's trade-offs, and we talk a lot about trade-offs throughout the classes being our big objective, right? And I can't tell you how real trade-offs get with event planning and especially with wedding event planning. And it's just because there are so many, the bottom line is there's always a fixed budget. Um, you may be fortunate enough to have family members like a mom or dad or whomever that are kicking in some money. But also, you may not. It may be your own funding sources. But whatever it is, there's always an upper limit. And, determining what that upper limit is first is really important. But then underneath it, you're pretty much a trade-off machine, right? And figuring out what's important to you so you can basically make those trade-offs to optimize the event. So you basically make it the best you can within your budget. So to me, with all the different things that we've been talking about, the decision-making approach that we use, and we use Definitive to do, this one is probably one of the better ones just because the trade-offs are so significant and hit you very fast is the bottom line. But there's another part of it too, which you're gonna get a taste of with the home buying project, which is the pronouns change, right? So it's gone from an I decision, what's important to me, to a what's important to us. There, two people get married usually. So it goes from one to two, me to us, and that's where it gets really tricky. You'll find similar to the home buying, it's emotional. Of course, weddings are emotional, events are emotional, and people coming together on their criteria is very important and challenging if you don't do it in the right way. So we're going to talk about the right way today to solve these trade-offs. And anyway, so let's go ahead and talk about our objectives for today. So we're going to explore how choice architecture makes the best event decisions. Again, our choice architecture is Definitive Choice. You can actually use other ones. There are other ones on the market, but certainly now that you're used to Definitive Choice, that's a good one to use. So we're going to walk through the event planning framework, which again more generalized. We're also going to talk about some of the research around this and really how emotions play into event planning as well. We're going to explore the event planning principle, which kind of plays into that emotional side of it that I made reference to. We're going to walk through a wedding example. Again, funny enough that my daughter's getting married tomorrow, so that's been her big thing for sure. But we're going to be walking through a wedding example, and then we're going to discuss the decision support solutions, and how to use definitive as well as how to overlay Gen AI, Chat GPT, or the other GPTs that you may want to use. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the wedding and event. So first of all, maybe this is just my geeky self, but I've been to a lot of weddings. At my age, my friends' children and all the people that I've grown up with, a lot of them are in their 20s now, so people are coupling up. The next generation, they're getting married more often. So I'll go to these weddings, but I always have a conversation, usually with the mom and the dad. They're friends of mine, so they're very patient with me. But I ask them, and I try to do it in a very casual way, but I am sort of collecting this information just because I'm just very interested in understanding. So the first question is, how important is it to you that your children are engaged in the wedding decisions? And of course, their first thing is, yeah, well, of course, it's very important. We really want them to do this. We don't want to make the decisions for them. It's important for them with their life. They're a new married couple or soon to be married couple. So that's always their first thing. So everybody's aligned on that. But then I'll ask the second question, which is, now that the wedding weekend has come and gone, was the wedding couple as involved in the wedding decisions as they could or should have been? And what this is where everything kind of splits, right? So on the one hand, about half the people say our adult children owned their wedding decision process. Their decisions were not always perfect, but they learned a lot and had an amazing wedding, right? But then the other half, the other 50% say, well, we were actually probably over involved, or they'll say something like that, suggesting that they were just doing more than they thought that they really wanted to do. So what they would say is, at the time, they just didn't seem like they were able to make good enough decisions, so we stepped in, right? And I think that, and from my standpoint, as I both researched this and participated as a parent, that's really, that second half is really the challenge, and where I think parents and the wedding folks are the people that are running the event. So let's kind of step back. If you are in a company running the event, you're going to have event people that are in charge of putting the event on. And then you're going to have stakeholders that either own the budgets or otherwise provide the funding, or are the beneficiaries. Like if the marketing department's putting it on for the sales team are the ones, that are getting the benefit from it because they're going to drive revenue because they got some sales for who they're bringing in. But it's the marketing or event team that puts it on. So it's sort of the same in that way, right? And with a wedding, you've got, of course, the participants, the people that are doing it, the bride and the groom, or the bride and the bride, the groom and the groom, whatever. But you usually have parents or other significant stakeholders that either are providing some funding or also involved, of course. So anyway, so that's the kind of way to think about that. By the way, that picture in the upper right is on the heart. That's actually my son Josh when he proposed to my daughter-in-law Sydney, and now they have two children, and he is 29 and also a JMU grad. So anyway, all right. So let's now talk a little bit about, so first of all, I do that more informal survey, but it helps me validate the thinking around event planning and how challenging it can be. And a little bit, by the way, a little bit later, we're going to talk about the money side of it, of course, because this is a personal finance class. We will be talking about the financial models and the power of how impactful it can be, depending on how much money you spend on your wedding to later in life. Like it'll be in the same model or approach where we compare the money that you spend, say, in your 20s to what the opportunity cost against something that maybe you'd be saving for retirement and putting it into some sort of robo-advisor, or that, sort of quadrant 2 base strategy. Okay. So anyway, but that'll come a little bit later. But my preamble is it's incredibly significant. And that's one of the reasons why I bring it up as a personal finance. That's why it's in a personal finance class, is because of its significance. And the truth is, like some personal finance decisions, you don't necessarily think about it that way. And sometimes that's the challenge. And so my challenge to you is you should think about it as a personal finance decision, as well, of course, as an important decision for you and the person that you're marrying. Okay. All right. So let's talk about some of the research. Hold on for just a second. Sorry about that. We've got a lot going on here, getting ready for the wedding. Um, so a couple of big researchers in the decision space, actually one of my favorites, and an excellent book if you're ever looking for a relatively, and not a super challenging read. It's more of a popular book than like a real deep, like a research article or academic-y kind of work. But a guy named Barry Schwartz, who's been at Swarthmore for forever. He wrote a book called The Paradox of Choice, and he really nails it in terms of some of the challenges. But he really focuses on what's called decision agency. Okay. And his whole point is that in events, or it could be really in any decision, but we're going to apply it to events today. The real challenge is that people that have decision agency, that feel like they own the decision, so the couple that's getting married, the more agency they have, the better they feel, the better the wedding goes, or the event goes, or the decision goes. So he was able to draw a direct line between the degree to which there's decision agency and the degree to which, or the outcome of the decisions that were made, and ultimately the event itself. Okay, so that's Schwartz. Again, his book Paradox of Choice is excellent. And then another fella, he's actually an American, but he's landed in Queensland, which is in New Zealand. His name is Roy Baumeister. So Baumeister actually wrote a book called Willpower, which is another very good book, all about like how do you maximize your willpower, and sort of written in the same sort of way that Schwartz's book was. It's relatively easy to understand, written for a popular audience. Another one I'd recommend you read. But he talks a lot about the challenge of decision fatigue. And what he means is, so let's talk about a wedding or any event like that. You end up having to make a ton of small decisions all along the process. And it can feel a little bit overwhelming. And there is a real thing called decision fatigue, where you just basically wear out making all these small decisions all along. And eventually what it does, and basically with his book, right, it wears down your willpower, right? Your ability to make the right decision, because you have this whole decision fatigue challenge. So again, my point in part of this class, using a definitive choice and the technology tools, that's how you avoid decision fatigue. That's kind of the whole point, right? So anyway, so but these are two, Baumeister, Schwartz, really good work. But again, I'm bringing this up mainly to share there's a lot of really great research around this that I use for the class, and for how we've created the curriculum here at JMU. All right. So now we're going to jump right into the process. I think we are, if I can figure out how to change. Hold on. There it is. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the process and what I call the principle. We're going to get into the more detailed part of the process, but we're going to start at let's call it the accuracy level, right? Like, how do we think about event planning? And then once we sort of get the more higher level kind of concepts and how we want to be accurate, and then we'll jump into some of the precision that we get in with the process. But there are really two pillars. But even before you start with the pillars, let's talk about the event success principle, and it's very simple. How guests feel after the event governs their perception of the event. Okay, let me say that again. How guests feel after the event govern their perception of the event. Okay, and actually, Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman did a ton of research around this, what he calls the remembering self, the things that we remember. And I would invite you now to think back to events that you have gone to, maybe to other friends that have gotten married or older siblings that have gotten married or any, but it doesn't even have to be a wedding, but another event. What do you remember? What really stands out? And what's really interesting is that what stands out is much less about what I'll call event facts, right? Like if you go to a wedding, the wedding's going to be in a building. And like, for example, my daughter's wedding is at North Palm Beach Country Club, right? So it's going to be in a building, but it'll be like the wedding is actually out on like the first tee, so really pretty view, that whole thing. But then, after they get married, we'll process and go into like the clubhouse where there's an event facility where we're going to have the event. So my point in bringing that up, the golf course is quite nice. It's a nice club. It's a beautiful area. It's North Palm Beach, Jupiter, that part of the world. The building itself is quite nice, all that stuff. But here's the thing. Will I remember that? Would most people remember like those specific details? What research tells us is not so much, not as much as you may think you would. What you tend to remember are feelings. Feelings have long durations. People remember their feelings, especially negative feelings, but positive feelings as well. They remember how they felt at an event. So that's why that number one single event success principle, again, how guests feel after the event will govern their perception of the event. So that's kind of the baseline starting point. Okay. But then we're going to jump into kind of the two, kind of what I call the two pillars. Okay. One is around event emotions on the left of that graphic. And then we're going to get into the community trade. But actually, pillar one is community trade and event emotions is number two. So now let's talk a little bit about the community trade. So what's really interesting, and let me put it in the context of a wedding. People have a misunderstanding about weddings sometimes in that it's all about the bride and groom, right? You're paying for it. You're the one who's getting married, the bride and the groom, or again, the bride and the bride, the groom and the groom. But the truth is, if all you want to do was to get married, you would elope, right? The point of having an event like a wedding has everything to do with the trade, what we call the community trade, where the people that are getting married want to get married with their community. They love their community, but they're also even seeking a little bit more. They're seeking community validation, right? So they want to have an event where they can bring in their friends, their family, the people that are important to them, and it becomes part of the validation of their wedding or of their marriage. Okay. Whereas what does, what is the trade, right? So if on one side it's the bride and the groom get the validation, that's why the arrow goes from the attendees there on the right side going towards the bride and the groom on the left side. Well, the flip opposite side of that is, well, what are the bride and the groom giving? Well, they are giving community connection. They're bringing folks together. Okay. And that is the whole essence of the community trade. I know it probably sounds a little bit weird, like putting it in like almost like a financy arbitragey thing kind of feeling to it. But when you kind of break it down, that's what it is, right? And again, if there's a difference between getting married and a wedding, if all you want to do is get married, you'd elope. It'd be a lot cheaper and you'd get to the same place. You're married. A wedding is different. right? And that's kind of the whole point. If you're going to have a wedding, you've got to think about that community trade, that it is a trade between the people throwing the event, the beneficial owners of the event, so to speak, husband, wife, and then their community. Okay, so now let me talk a little bit about like give a corporate event example. Like, so when I worked at KPMG, so KPMG is a big four accounting firm, and one of the things that we would do at KPMG is all accountants. So for those of you who are that accountants, you probably already know this, but for non-accountants, they have to once they get their CPA, to keep their CPA license, they have to do what's called CPEs, or continuing professional education, right? So it's not just about getting the CPA. Every year after you get your CPA, you have to do trainings to stay up because the accounting world is very dynamic, right? Things change, FASB rules change. The AICPA may make some changes. The PCOAB may make some changes, right? So there's all these governing bodies. So it's a dynamic space. So they have to get CPE. So what we would do is, because we're an accounting firm, we would host CPE events, right? So the way it would work is our clients, or sometimes our prospective clients, we would hold an event. They would get training. As part of that event, it would be sanctioned as a CPE event. So they would get their like 3 credits of CPEs or whatever it was for attending the event. But we weren't doing it just for the love, right? We're an accounting firm, we're a professional services firm, and we're always in the hunt for either deepening our relationships with our clients or bringing in new clients, right? So that was the trade, right? We were giving them access to CPEs as well as access to each other, that community spirit of bringing people together, and the feel, you feel good when you're together with the people that you either work with or other people in your industry, maybe people you haven't seen for a while. So that's what we gave them, right? Both the credits and the community. But what they gave us was the ability for us to drive our sales pipeline, right? We increased how much we sold accounting services as a result of these events. So that's an example, accounting example, but again, sort of similar to the whole the wedding and the marriage event as well. Okay. All right. So that's the first pillar, the community trade. All right. Now the next pillar is what I'll call event emotions, right? And we've already talked a little bit about this, but very simply, and this really again goes back to the work that Daniel Kahneman did. So there are really two big things about event emotions. Okay. How did you feel about the connections you made? Or how did you feel about the curiosity you were able to satisfy? Okay. Those are some of the event emotions that people are able to, to create in their life, right? Those are the things they are likely to remember. Like, well, strangely enough, like in the CPE example, exactly what they learned, what we were training them on, really kind of the purpose of them being there, they're much less likely to remember that, even though they do take a test, of course, to get their CPEs, but those are less sticky. The emotions of the event is what they remember. Same thing can be said true for a wedding, right? You are less likely, like in the case of my daughter, for people to remember the clubhouse or the venue facility we were in. What they will remember is two families coming together, how they felt, the people that they hadn't met before from the other family that they got to meet and they got to break bread with, they got to be with, and also reconnecting with family that maybe they hadn't seen each other for a while. Those are the emotions that people are going to remember. Okay. And again, that's the research of Daniel Kahneman. So the remembering self, there's really two things to think about when you're driving a wedding or any event. Okay. There are two big things. And this again comes from his research: the peak emotional intensity during the event and the emotions related to the last part of the event. So those are the two things. Like, the overall how you felt during the event is important, but then when you kind of take it to the next level and say, okay, but where do those emotions come from, and to make them really sticky, those are the two places. emotional intensity during the event. So if there's a particularly high point, people tend to remember that. But also the end of the event, it's kind of interesting. That's what people remember. Now let's take some examples with this. So I have a barber. So I live in Great Falls. I go to a barber over in Reston. That's just where I happen to go. And he cuts my hair. My hair is really easy to cut, right? Like I have lots of choices. I don't really care that much as long as it's cut and it looks normal. I'm good with that. But they do something a little bit different. At the end of every time I get my hair cut, they take like a hot towel, not too hot, a super warm towel. They put it over my face. They rub my ears. They give me a little neck massage, maybe a little bit, a little scalp massage or whatever. It's awesome, right? That's the emotions related to the last part of the event. So my barber, I didn't, he's not in this class, but they know that through their industry, they know how people feel related to the last part of an event, like me getting my haircut, matters, right? So that's just a kind of a funny little example, but that's the way it is. Now let's talk about branding for a second, especially for you marketers out there. People get confused sometimes around what brands are. Okay. So for example, Starbucks. If you really think about what Starbucks is, your first response may be, hey, Starbucks is a coffee company. Their brand is built around coffee. Well, actually, that's not true. If you talk to Starbucks and look at their website and kind of dig into their marketing strategy, the Starbucks brand is actually built around community. They seek to bring people together in a community. And it just turns out that coffee is one of the practical things that's there to them that kind of keeps them in and gives them a little caffeine. Maybe it helps to actually bring the community and activate the community. But it's community is what Starbucks does. So if you really think about how brands are built, they're while they all companies do something, right? But the doing is kind of table stakes. Like Starbucks makes coffee, right? Well, the important thing to think about is, well, how does Starbucks make people feel? And that's the essence of their brand. They're focused on community, and when people come together, they feel good. So anyway, so that's just another example there. All right. And actually, one of my funny examples too is I advise my sons, David and Daniel. They're the leaders of the Hewlett brothers that do the content creation, right, on TikTok and YouTube and other places. And they used to think of themselves as trick shotters, like we do trick shots, right? And over time, I finally kind of convinced them it's like, actually, what you do is you bring people joy and the way you deliver your content is really built around achievement, helping people feel that they can achieve, right? And if you've ever watched any of their content before, they always have a bunch of misses with something that's a relatively hard trick shot, and then they make it, right? So it's like miss, 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 try real hard, make. So the trick shot is interesting. It's appealing to watch, but my point is it's really built around the emotion of joy and achievement. And that's something that people like, right? So so they've built their brand while it is trick shot focused as what they do, the facts, but the emotion that really people remember, it turns out, is really built around joy and achievement. So anyway, all right. So back to our friend Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, and I know I've brought this up before, this quote, and because it's just so kind of prescient and applies to so many things, we're going to apply it again here. So Warren Buffett said, as we have talked about before, price is what you pay, value is what you get, right? Price is what you pay, value is what you get. And he's kind of separating out supply and demand, and really as a demander being clear about what's important to you, because what's important to you is the value that you get. versus the price is what you happen to pay, and they're not always connected. And in fact, they're rarely connected. So again, in the case of an event, right, being really, really clear about what's important to you, or of course, what's important to us, the bride and the groom or the other people that are the key decision makers in an event. That's the starting point. That's really important. Okay. So the question really then becomes, if now we understand, right, and you buy into, which I hope you do through all this research from the Nobel laureates, that it's really that emotion that's driving the value, why would you pay more for facts, right? If it's what people, if the reason you're bringing people into your event, right, because you're doing the community trade, right? And you know the value that they're going to take away from that community trade is a feeling. Why would you pay more? Right? And that's what I want to challenge you with. Why would you pay more? And again, at the end, I'm going to show you the models that'll help you understand what more means. But for now, I want to sort of start with that, kind of putting that into your brain a little bit, and then we'll come back to validate what more actually leads to in terms of the opportunity cost to your retirement. Okay. All right. So what I encourage you to do is to apply his sage advice to events and being clear about your wedding objective. The prices of the various event elements will be optimized in the context of how you define value. And again, being clear about how you define value via your community and what they remember. And then certainly you can apply that to many, many other big events in your life. But we're using the wedding as the example here. All right. All right. So now let's look at a rule of thumb. Okay. So rules of thumb to me are like tiebreakers, right? So we're going to talk about using the app a little bit later on, which is a tie-breaking machine, right? If you think about it, it's making those trade-offs for you, breaking lots of ties. But sometimes, even with the app, you just have to, you don't always know exactly how to move the slider, right? So sometimes it's good just to have a rule of thumb or a tiebreaker that's like, oh, well, if I think about it in this context, I know which way to move the slider. So this is the rule of thumb for how to think about those trade-offs. If you keep joy and love of your wedding community as the focus, you should be able to reduce the cost of lower priority event facts, right? Again, you have a fixed budget. You're having to make trade-offs under that budget. So then the question becomes, how do I make those trade-offs? And again, that's the challenge. I'm assuming none of you have gotten married before. I'm hopeful for you that you will someday. It's a great thing. I've been married for over 30 years. It's a good thing, trust me. But if you do, that's where it's going to get real, making those trade-offs, okay? So the good news is when you have a wedding, your community, your family and friends really look forward to bringing love and joy as your value, right? They want to be happy, right? They are happy for you. They were just so happy to be invited, right? And they are all in to support that event. So all you really need to do is provide a safe, supportive environment, enabling your community to keep that love and joy as a memory, right? Again, the remembering self from Kahneman, right? So if you pay more than that, you're not necessarily getting any more value. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and talking about executing the trade. Now we're going to kind of get into this, a little bit uncomfortable side of being kind of like, oh, okay, it's like a trade, almost like we're, buying and selling a stock or something. So why don't we talk, and we're going to just have very specific sort of trades or slider movement with the Definitive Choice app, and we're just going to talk about it in that context of event emotions and kind of how to think about that rule of thumb. Okay. So first, as an example, you'll have a choice between doing a sit-down meal and a buffet, right? Sit down meal, you end up basically you need a place for people to be and sit, of course, but you need servers, right? Servers, and especially in the post-pandemic world, anything that's service-oriented, people cost money. It's just the way it works in the service industry. And actually, my daughter and my now almost future son-in-law is figuring all that out. They like automatically add like 22% tips. It just adds up very quickly if you really with anything where you have people involved in delivering the service, which a wedding really is, of course, heavy service oriented. So if you have a choice between a sit-down meal and a buffet, right? What's the big difference? Well, the buffet is you don't have table service. You have to get up, get your food, get whatever you want and go back and sit down. So you're basically eliminating sort of a group of servers that for that table service. So, but here's the thing about the facts, right? What are the event facts? Well, maybe people have an opinion on whether they like buffets or table service. I don't know. Honestly, as a fact, it's not, the research tells us it's not very memorable, right? People don't usually remember like how they got their food delivered, and they don't really care in general. Okay, but let's talk about the emotions here. And this is actually an important part of this. If you think about the way a buffet works, you're standing up, you're out of your table or wherever you're sitting, and you're interacting with other people in the wedding, right? The other people in the community. So you're actually going to be building more interaction and more opportunity for those event emotions. So to me, the trade between the sit-down meal and buffet actually has two advantages. One, the buffet is cheaper in general because you're eliminating the costs associated with table service, but also you're actually increasing the likelihood that by mixing people, you're going to drive more emotion. So instead of just the people that are sitting at the table, you kind of have a wider group of people that they'll be interacting with. Okay, so that to me, that's the way to think about that trade. Another one is weekday versus weekend. Weekend events tend to be much more expensive. If you and again back to the whole fact thing, nobody really remembers whether it was during the week or on the weekend. Certainly, if people are working, it might be a little more convenient. But in general, once you get past the event, most people don't remember that stuff, right? But again, weekday events are a whole lot less expensive. So that's another consideration with the trade. Okay, the venue itself. You have so many options around venues. Barn weddings have kind of gotten pretty popular. Or you can do a formal ballroom, and the ballroom could be, say, in like a city or in a place that's generally a more expensive area, right? So, like for example, my older son Josh, well, we live in DC. It's an expensive area. He ended up getting married in Richmond, Virginia. It's only 90 miles away, and it drove out a bunch of costs for him. Okay, but he was like, "It's fine. The people can drive to Richmond. It's not a big deal. It's a day trip." So that's kind of how they solve that. But again, the whole idea is people aren't going to remember, exactly the building itself, the venue, but they will remember, of course, being together. So if you can drive out cost by keeping those venue costs down, it's probably going to be it's going to be a benefit for you. Okay, now let's talk about um, the emotion side and speakers, right? So there are people that are just really, really eloquent speakers, right? You may have a family friend or family friends that are just known to be really high quality, engaging speakers that know how to engage the crowd, that love to do public speaking, etc. Remember we talked about near the end of the event, if somebody does a toast or otherwise gives a short but memorable speech, people will remember that, right? And the good news is that has no cost, right? I mean, like let's say you have a group of people that you're friends, one of them happens to be a good speaker. If you ask them this, they're not going to charge you money, right? They're like, yeah, sure, I'd love to, that kind of thing. So again, focusing on those emotions and taking advantage of your friends or family that are good speakers. And then finally, pictures. In your and the way I look at it, you're in about 20 or so. Your generation is very social media focused, right? Pictures are like really important. But what I'll tell you is videographers, photographers, professionals are really expensive, right? And so, again, another way to do that is to involve your guests. Your guests have really good iPhones that are very high quality. You have to be careful here because you don't want to like put your guests to work. But some guests really love taking pictures. And if you say to them, hey, I would love for you to take a picture here and there. Could you help me with this part of the wedding or whatever? They would probably jump all over it because they love taking pictures. That's what they do. They like that sort of thing. So again, I wouldn't put them to work unless they wanted to, but if you ask them and you know that they like doing that sort of stuff, that's another way you can drive out cost. And again, the whole idea is it's going to be a positive for the person taking the pictures because they like it, right? But then you'll get the keepsakes that you want for after the wedding. So anyway, so these are like just some examples. But my point really is once you start thinking about events, and again, using the wedding example here, you're going to come up with your own trades, right? And again, using the tool that, definitive choice to help you with those tools to help you with those trade-offs is really important. So here, these are just a few examples. Okay. All right. All right. So now let's go deeper into the process. So remember I said at the very beginning, we're going to start with the event success principle and the two pillars. Those are now at the top of the page there. But now let's start really focusing on the process itself. So now we're going from accuracy, where we seek to reduce bias. Now we're going to precision, where we seek to reduce noise. Remember, those are two different things. So that's sort of below that events success principle box. Now we're going to kind of focus on the next part of the process, which is more of the detail. Okay, so first let's talk about, there's really two big sort of interacting parts to the process. You have the event planning and you have the event budget. Now, what I would say for any event, especially for a wedding, getting your event budget set first will really benefit you. It's just easier to do. If you're trying to plan without clear knowledge about how much money you have, that's a challenge. It really makes everything kind of theoretical. Well, if we had this much money, we could do this or we could do that. Event budgets just help to focus the mind, right? If you had whatever your budget is, once you know what it is, then it'll be like, oh, okay, whether you like it or not, it's another thing, but it's real, right? The reality is I have a budget. So the point is getting that budget nailed down, I think is very helpful. Like for my children, the way we did it is we give them basically a fixed amount of money. We do it. We have 4 kids. We do the same amount for each one. We say, here's your bucket of money. You go, right? It's your wedding. It's not our wedding. But we make it clear for them how much money we're giving, and the bride or the groom's parents of our children's betrothed will do the same thing. Not everybody does it that way, but having that discussion with your parents or anybody that's going to be involved in the financial process, it's good to have that discussion first. Okay. Now it's a little bit hard because if like, let's say you get married, right? And you go to your parents, they're going to give you whatever they're going to give you. But then you may want to do, well, but I want to kick in some money. Maybe you've worked for several years and you've created some savings. Maybe you've already thought about it. So you wanted to save for your own wedding. So you have whatever your parents or other people gave you, but now you have money to kick in. Whatever that is, just try to nail it down. Okay. That's sort of step one. So what ends up happening is the event planning interacts with the event budget, obviously, because the budget um is the the cap. And what you're going to learn very quickly is if you the word wedding like doubles price of everything. It's kind of pathetic in my way of thinking about it, but it's the way it is, right? Weddings are expensive, and if you say I want to have a wedding at your venue versus some other event, they just increase the prices. That's just whatever. It's the way it is. But my point is, once you know what your budget is, you can very quickly start making some of those trade-offs to work under that budget threshold. Okay. But again, there's that trade-off. That's why I have that sort of the circular arrows there in the middle, because it is a trade-off. And sometimes what ends up happening is event planning, what's going to happen is you've never put on a wedding before, right? Unless you get divorced or whatever, or you have a second wedding. But for most people, for their first wedding, it's their first wedding. So they've never done it before. So as you go through the planning process, you're going to very quickly you'll see how powerful your budget is. And what will happen over time is as you learn more about your what you need to do and what you want to do with your significant other and how you're going to deal with working underneath that budget, you're just going to learn more, and there's more of that interaction between the planning and the budget. Okay. So just as a practical thing, for other people that I know and I've worked with, there's a really good website called The Knot, and they have basically like a really detailed roadmap, kind of beginning to the end of how to plan for a wedding. Okay. There are lots of other resources out there. I'm just suggesting that because I've seen it and I know that it's pretty good. But certainly it's a Google search away, right? You can find your own research. But when you're planning, sort of laying out in terms of an event, the basic end-to-end roadmap of here's like the 10 things that I need to do, that becomes pretty important. Okay. Now, of course, today we have ChatGPT, which if you ask ChatGPT a very specific question, it will answer it for you. So I use ChatGPT for that event budget. So one of the things that you can really benefit yourself from is using either an Excel spreadsheet or these templates that exist there that can kind of walk you through a budget that will help you. So if you say you had, whatever, $20,000, $30,000, whatever that number is, but then you need to start breaking it down between the different parts and where you want to apply those budget dollars, right? So anyway, so the templates, those kind of things really come in handy. So that's the ChatGPT prompt. I'd leave it in there for you when it comes time. This is, again, a tested prompt. I know it delivers good results. So I make that available to you. Okay. All right, now let's go to the other side of our process here. So, like with our other big decisions, like the home buying decisions, everything is done in a team. Okay, so in this case, if let's say one of the people that are going to get married would be like the team leader, so to speak, and they would invite their partner to attend as a team member. That's a perfect way to do that. That way, as you're going through all the different decisions and you're driving your criteria, right, you can do it together. Now, this is where it gets really, really helpful, because if you follow our standard process, right, and let's say take a wedding venue, you decide, okay, what's important to me about a wedding venue? And, the one partner goes through the process, they come up with what's important to them, and they come up with their decision model, like in definitive. And then the other teammate does the same thing independently. And then, of course, the way it works is you invite them to participate. It will bring those models together and it'll show you where you guys are apart. And that's super powerful, right? Because then you have a discussion. Why do I care about one thing a lot more than you do? And inevitably, like we've talked about before, the economists call private information, right? It's a great way to facilitate a discussion. The good news is the discussions don't take long. It's very positive for building a relationship and kind of getting deep with that relationship to have those honest discussions about money. Good to do early in a relationship. But this is a great place and a great way, a great use case for using definitive. Okay. So if the whole team members thing works really well, then of course you use the event success principle to weigh your criteria. So again, if you know that how people feel at the end, because sometimes you'll look at it and you'll go, okay, we're deciding about a venue and that has food, it has beverages, whatever, a bar. It's going to have a certain size to it. It's going to have certain natural features, whether it's on a golf course or out in the country, whatever that is, right? But you're going through that process of determining that criteria and weighing that criteria, and that's the point at which you do that. Okay. Now, in definitive choice, it's under what's called the wedding template is under the lifestyle section, and there are lots of different templates. I think we've got like 10 or so different templates because again, there's lots of different decision categories. I use the venue as the example, but of course there are many other decisions that have to be made. Okay. All right. So anyway, that is the idea of the event decisions, and we're going to be using the wedding example. So right now it is 12:30. So we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. And when we come back, we're actually going to do an in-class project where we're going to use definitive to make the venue decision together. And then we're going to do a brief report out on that. Okay, but let's go ahead. It is 12:30 right now. We'll do our 10 minutes. So please be back and ready to engage at 12:40. Okay? All right.
Hey, Professor.
Yes. Hey,
My
Deacon.
my definitive choice app isn't working right now. Like the
Oh,
text is white and I can't see anything.
oh, shoot. Did you do you have like can you try on your computer maybe? Could you log in
Yeah,
like
I don't have my computer with me, but when I get home I can try it on my computer as
okay.
well.
Thanks for telling me. Sorry about that. Do you think would it help to reload the app maybe?
Yeah, I tried to exit out, clear it out, and then try it again, and it I have an Android and I've always had a hard time with it.
Okay.
Is there a place on Canvas to submit this?
The presentation?
The selecting a wedding venue?
Yeah. No, it'll be same. I put up the assignment. Just do the screenshot like we and put it up in the notes section. Does
Perfect.
that make sense? Yeah. All right. All right, it is 12:40, so I'm going to go ahead and jump back in, folks. So now we're going to use definitive choice to select a wedding venue. Again, this is a practice being consistent with what we just walked through in terms of some of the research around this and the event planning principle and the two pillars. Okay. So first, let's talk. I'm going to talk about the procedure first, and then we're going to jump into the app. And I'll pull up the app and kind of show you what I'm seeing as well. Okay. So in so I have my PowerPoint up now. I took it down from presenter mode. Just it'll make it easier for me to switch over to definitive. But here's what we're going to do right now. We're going to create your own wedding venue criteria model. You'll go to definitive choice. It's under the lifestyle, and you choose the wedding venue selection. Go to the manage criteria, choose the top five. You can use your own default. You can use the default criteria or make your own. Decide which ones are must-have filters. And what I mean by that, if there's something on there that you just must have, that's a different kind of criteria. But what you want is weighable criteria, right? Criteria that you can trade off, basically. I would argue that all your at this point, since you've never been married before, this is your first run through, that all your criteria should be should be sort of weighable, so to speak. All right. And then you'll go ahead and create a weighted criteria model, walking through the sliders with and weighing the criteria. At this point, it's your best guess, right? You've never been married before. I'm making that assumption. So don't feel bad that you're like, oh, I've never been married. How would I even know how to think about this? That's okay. Remember, your judgment is a lot better than you think. But remember the event success principle, right? Overlay that emotional side of it, right? Like, oh, okay, this isn't actually for me. This is for my community. And if the biggest thing they're going to walk away with is a good feeling and the emotions, that's where their memory comes from. They're remembering self. Plug that into your brain now and use it as you're moving the slider. Okay. Just encourage you to do that. To get credit, let me go to the next slide here. Um, I want you to go ahead and uh, dump it into a PowerPoint or a Google presentation, whatever you'd like to do. You will basically upload it to the assignments like we normally do in the notes section. What I'd like you to do is after you build that model, I want you to answer these two questions or three questions really. What was your top criteria and why? Or top criterion, I should say, right? I don't know if you knew this, but criteria is plural. criterion is singular. So bad on me, but I corrected it. So what was your lowest criterion? Boom, bang. And why? Okay. So you answer those two questions. Plus, how did the event success principle impact your criteria weight? Okay. So what I suggest, we're going to do it now. So for those of you that are here, of course, you can upload it as soon as you're done with the class. Deacon, I understand your situation, so work to get your app reloaded here. But kind of walking along with the rest of the class, I think will benefit you. All right. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to switch over to by the way, can y'all see the definitive choice screen? I just flipped over to it. You cannot see it. Okay. You guys are probably wondering what the heck I'm doing then. All right. So thank you for that, Maddie, for the head shake. So hopefully now can you see it now? Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and log in. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do the wedding venue selection. Just click new decision. You're currently using the free and close. Okay. It's asking me to upgrade. I don't know why it's doing that, but okay. All right, so basically we're at the wedding venue selection. Um, and now we're just going to be focused on the criteria. Okay. Now, if you went through it, actually, let me go ahead and back out of this. Let me do it from the beginning. So I'm going to trash this, delete. Yes. Okay. So we're going to do this again. Oh, damn. All right. All right. So what am I going to do here? I don't know why it's giving me a hard time. Change password. All right. Give me a second here, folks. My apologies. So log out. So I'm just going to register as a new user. First name is Jeff. H J at pesth.com. JFF 5333. JFF 5333. All right. So I'm going to register. Skip. All right. All righty. So go to the new decision. Again, you go down to the lifestyle section here. And if you'll notice on here, there are lots of different of these lifestyle selection things that you can choose from, most of them related to weddings. You're going to use the wedding venue selection. Okay. You can pretty much use all these default settings. It's just called Just Wedding. The things that you want to focus on to make sure is that this is a decision which I want to determine and evaluate criteria first and apply alternatives second. So that's the first thing you want to do. And then you want to keep costs separate. Remember, so you get the two-dimensional thing, benefit on one axis and costs on the other axis. So you can go ahead. Again, it's the default. So you'll say save and start. Okay. Okay, so this gives you a bunch of default criteria. And I think this is way overkill, and I think I suggest you only want to have 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, click on Manage Criteria. And if you'll remember, we've added Oliver, right? So we can use Oliver here. That's our Gen AI tool. And it has the prompt, lists the criteria that may be used when evaluating Jeff's wedding venue selection. I'm going to change this. So I'm going to say it so I am, say, 25 years old. I this is my first wedding. Please suggest criteria. criteria to help me and my fiance make the best venue decision. All right, so you see what I did there? I told them a little bit about myself and ourself, right? And what I'm asking for. And I said finance. I meant to say fiance, I don't know why. I think that's how you spell it, fiance. So now we're going to ask AI. And now what I'm going to ask for also is please, I don't know why I'm so polite with AI. It doesn't really care, but please provide 7 criteria. So remember how we want to do this. We want to start with more than we need, and then we ask. Now, the nice thing about this is it's going to do a couple things. It's going to give you what you asked for in your prompt. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to give you a brief definition of what they are. And then finally, it's going to give you the ability to add it to your model so you don't have to like retype anything, which is pretty cool, right? So these are the 7 vendor restrictions. Some venues have strict policies. I'm going to add that guy. I don't know. I'm going to take privacy level. I don't really care about sound if it's not great, whatever. Lighting, maybe backup plans for weather. Yeah, I want to have it outside if we can. Guest experience is massive. And I think I'm going to go with architectural style. So anyway, so I basically broke it down from instead of the 7, I kind of put in what I think my 5 are. So now they've been added, right? And so these 5 have been added. Now what I have to do is X out of all these other ones, which I wish you didn't have to do this one at a time, but you do. So just give me a second. All right. So yeah, so please, while I'm doing this, do it on your own. I just wanted to kind of share with you how a super user like me would do it. Okay. So anyway, so now I've got my 5 criteria. I've got a brief definition of what those criteria are. I generally agree with them. You don't have to agree with these definitions. It's important that you have these definitions. Again, you're getting married, so you've got another person that should effectively be aligned with the definitions. It doesn't mean you have to be aligned with, at least up front, the weighting, but you should agree with what they mean. Okay, so it's not actually a bad thing to have that discussion. Okay, so we've done this. Then the next thing we would do is go to prioritize the criteria. I'm not, this is where this is on you, but as you remember, again, I encourage you to use that event planning principle, how people, feel at the end of the event governs their perception of the event. Use that mindset as you kind of step through these. Okay. All right. Any questions about using the app? The Evan, the assignment should be posted. I have posted it beforehand. Are you not seeing the I guess you're not seeing it on Canvas. So I'll check right after we get done here. But it should be on Canvas. A little weird. Well, while you guys are doing that, so let's go back. Again, what we're trying to accomplish here. Let me share my screen again. All right. This is how you're going to get credit for it. Again, in the PowerPoint or Google presentation, you're going to basically want to go through your weighted criteria, weight it yourself, right? What was your top criterion and why? What was your lowest criterion and why? How did that impact when you applied your event success principle, right? And so those are really the 3 things that I'm trying to get out of this. I would imagine it's probably going to be like a 2 or 3 page PowerPoint is fine for something like this. Okay. And it's 12:53 right now. I'll give you till a little bit after 1, and then we're going to jump back in. So what I'm going to want to do is we're going to have a conversation about this, and I'm going to be asking, you know, to for some of you to share your answers to those 3 questions. Okay. So just be prepared to be able to do that when we come back. Again, it'll be in about 8 to 10 minutes. And I like your dog, man.
Thank you. He likes to get involved.
Yes. See, I thought cats were that way. I guess dogs are that way too. And if you want, once you're done, if you just want to put a thumbs up on your screen, that way I'll know if we can start a little bit earlier. All right, y'all, remember to give me a thumbs up when you're done. Thank you, Craig. Gotcha. All right, y'all, in about a minute, we're going to go ahead and restart. So if you could please wrap up. All right. We're gonna go ahead and get started again. And the question was asked about the assignment. It's called the wedding venue criteria assignment. I actually it was not up on Canvas, so thank you, Evan, for pointing that out. So it is now activated. So hopefully you see that again. You know, in like traditionally in the notes section, you can put the file itself that you created, and that'll be your evidence for completion. Okay. All right. So let's go back here. Give me a second. I am going to stop sharing. Now I'm going to share again. We're going to go back. All right. So now let's talk about the selection itself. And so I'm going to go ahead. Um, so what I'm first looking for is top criterion, and actually I'm going to start picking on people a little bit here. So, Kai, if you would please, what was your top criterion? And I don't know if one of mine that I already have on here, but if you could, I don't know if you can unmute yourself, but that would be great.
Yeah, can
Yeah,
you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you just fine, Kai.
So I had different criteria, but my top was capacity.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and add that because I think that's fine. And what does capacity mean to you?
Just like the size of the venue, how many like people I could fit and bring to the wedding.
Okay, that makes sense. And that was your top criterion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, why? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think just because I want to be able to invite like all of my friends and family for that day, and I don't want to have to be selective and worry about who I'm inviting.
Okay, good. Now, was your did the event success principle that we talked about earlier, how did that impact your thinking on capacity?
That's probably I guess what kind of led me to rank capacity so high, honestly.
Okay. Meaning there are a lot of people that you want to come and they couldn't be there together to enjoy the day if they couldn't fit.
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right. What about the lowest one? What was on your low list?
Lowest was actually availability, which I kind of thought was surprising to me.
I'm going to go with that then. Meaning kind of like if it's not available, there's probably other ones you can choose from.
Yeah, I guess so. And I was also figuring like if I'm planning a wedding, I'm probably planning it months or maybe even like a year or two in advance. So I'd have a lot of time to kind of find the right availability.
Got it. Yep. That's probably good.
So yeah, I think that's why I ranked it so low.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you, Kai.
Yeah, no problem.
Jacob Lammy, if you could talk to us a little bit about that. What did you think? What
Sure.
was your top criterion?
My top criterion was price.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and add that as a separate one. So you did a little bit different because a lot of times price is a separate in terms of um, benefit criteria, right? It's a cost, but that's fine. You can use it as criterion, but yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that. Why is price?
Well, I've just heard a lot about how weddings are often extremely expensive, so I feel like not trying to spend a ridiculous amount could be smart in the long run.
Right. Okay. Yes, my so far I'll tell you for my two kids that have already done it, I think they're between 30 and $50,000. Which we kicked in some for, but we didn't kick in all that. So, they worked for several years but anyway, yes, to your point, that sounds like a lot of money. And honestly, though, I have friends that spend a lot more than that. So, okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Jacob. That's good stuff. Now, what's your lowest criterion?
Um, I said availability for my lowest.
Okay. And why do you think that?
Well, I mean, I guess if one venue isn't really available, I feel like there's a lot of other options to
Right.
choose from, so it's not really something that's extremely important. to
Got it.
me.
Okay. Makes sense to me. Okay, good. All right. Give me a second here. All right. How about Ellie Botsman? What's your take on this, Ellie?
My top criterion was setting.
Was what?
Setting.
Into what does setting mean to you?
Like the location really, if it's at like a church or outdoors or where it actually is held.
Okay. Did you have something in mind?
Um, yeah, I mean, I'd want to be at a church, but like a really like pretty one.
Okay. Okay. Good. Cool. Yeah, that I think that's important. It's funny. I'm Catholic and my wife is Catholic, and the way the Catholic Church works is they pretty much won't marry you outside of a Catholic church. And at
hmm
first we were like, hey, we'd love to do it outside. We looked at we started looking at venues until we realized, well, we want to be married in the Catholic Church and they've got rules. And that was
Yeah.
one of the rules that, yeah, we'll marry you, but you've got to do it inside a church. So
hmm
anyway, that makes sense. Okay. All right, what about your low criterion?
My low one was accessibility.
Okay. And what does accessibility mean to you?
Um, I just kind of thought that if there were guests or family members that weren't able to like transportation there was an issue, then we could like work something out with them to help them. So,
Okay. So you weren't going to be like if the church didn't have lots of ramps and stuff like that. And that's a good one because grandparents especially, as people get older, it gets tougher to move around. So it's good that you're thinking about that.
mhm.
But your thing is accessibility is a lower criterion just because your belief is you can overcome
Y-
accessibility challenges.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So what about that event success principle? How did you think about that or how did you apply that?
Well, like you said, um, we were talking about your Catholic background. My family comes from a Catholic background too, so I
Okay.
know that, like, and so does my boyfriend's right now, so it would be like ideal for both of our families to have this event that is kind of like in touch with their religious backgrounds. So that would make for an overall better experience for everyone too.
Got it. Yep. Good. I like that. That's the way it worked out for us. So.
hmm
Okay, good. Well, thank you. All right, we're going to do one more. Why don't we go ahead and do Georgia barefoot? Are you on still, I hope? Could you share with us, Georgia, what your thoughts are on the your top criterion? You're just going to have to take it off mute if you know how to do that. All right, Georgia, you might be away from your computer. All right, how about Brianna? Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Oh, good. So what do you think? What was your top criterion?
My top one was guest experience.
Okay. So I'm going to, that's there. I'm going to put that here. Okay. So guest experience. Tell me about what is guest experience to you?
I just want everyone there to feel comfortable and have a great time.
Okay. Now, how do you think that happens? Just in your mind.
Um, I think I'll think about the different guests who would be coming and maybe things I know that make them feel more comfortable or less comfortable and just have different options, for different people
Mhm.
at the venue. So
Got it. Got it. Okay. Now, what about the lowest criterion?
For me, it was curfew.
Curfew. All right. Now, by the way, did you use um the default criteria, or did you use the AI to come up with your own, or come up with a unique set for you?
I used both.
Okay. All right. So curfew meaning what?
I was thinking like the time like I we weren't allowed to be there anymore. And to go along with that, I know that it's nice to have like schedules for the day, but I also want to leave some space if something just comes up and to be in the moment and go with the flow. And so I don't want to be stressed about just trying to get out if there's a curfew if I don't have to.
Okay. Well, but that's you said that's your low criterion, right?
Yeah, so then I was willing to trade this expectation for other criteria options.
Okay. So
I
you're defining it as like you wouldn't want that to happen, but compared to all the other things, it's still relatively low.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So you're basically your assumption is if I have to trade it, I'm more willing to have a strict curfew, perhaps,
Yeah.
if I can get all the other things I want. Okay. Got it. So yeah, thank you. That's actually really helpful. So I'm looking at, and can you guys see my PowerPoint screen right now with the criterion?
Yes.
Yes, you can. Okay, thank you. So what it strikes me as what's really interesting to me is, I just called on four of you, and two males, two females, and all of you came up with all except for one, all of you had different top and low criteria, right? And to me, I mean that's there's a point in that, right? Which is well, one, you're obviously not getting married, so it's not as quite as real. You don't quite have skin in the game yet, right? So we're just talking about it for the first time here. But the point is really that the chances of there being variance and volatility, even between you and the person you're going to marry, is pretty high. And having these discussions early on is super, super helpful for y'all to get on the same page, because what's going to happen next is once you get on the same page, you have to figure out how to engage your family community, right? Your mom and dad or other people that might be footing the bill. People that foot the bill sometimes want to have a little more say, right? And so that's why it's so important that before you sort of going out, so you're the core, right? You and the person you're marrying are the core two. You're the agents. You're making the decisions. So y'all come together. Okay, this is what's important to us. You work through what your two different top and low criterion is. Make sure you're comfortable with your joint criteria model, and then you can invite and involve your parents and share with them, this is what we think is important. This is really what we'd like to accomplish as our first big event that we're putting on as a married couple, which is our wedding. So anyway, so that's kind of the thing to my big thing I take away from this. Okay, so next, and we're going to actually wrap up here in just a little bit. So we're going to get out a little bit early. But what I wanted to do is now talk about, I talked about at the beginning the costs. And it was brought up as one of the criterion, right? One of the big deals, which I'm really glad that you guys should be thinking about it. They can be expensive. Like I was saying before, you just put the wedding or into, a word and the costs go up. I mean, it's just like it's an interesting thing. It's just the way venues work when they're preparing for a wedding. I don't know if they're really more expensive or whether it's just they know they can get more money. So they make it more expensive. It's a market thing. Don't know, but it is the truth, which is weddings can be expensive. So this model that we're going to talk about now really gets into the notion of a wedding being a personal finance decision. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up this model. You can certainly look at it yourself. I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to reshare the actual model itself. So give me just 1 second. There it is. I'm getting good at this. Okay. So here's the model. It's a Google Sheet model, so you can go back. I'll have it out for you in the in the PowerPoint. You can play with this. I'm making some assumptions here, right? So first of all, y'all are mainly you're college students, so I'm assuming most of y'all are in your 20s. I know there's a few of you that are older, but let's just go with that for a second. So your age of marriage, I'm assuming is in your mid is like 5 to 7 years from now. It could be sooner, it could be later. I'm also making an assumption about your retirement age, right? So I have 70. I think that would be a little old. Let's just start with like the normal Social Security when you get full benefits, which is at 62. Okay. And then we're going to use that pre-tax yield of 10%, which basically assumes that you're able to take money and put it into a relatively high volatile, high growth strategy. And the reason you're comfortable with this is because you're going to set it and forget it and know that you're going to ride through several business cycles, and so you can earn 10%, but it's going to be a little bumpy getting there. But that's, we've talked about how that works with volatility, diversity, and time, right? Diversification and time. You're giving it the time, you're giving it the diversification, you're going to have to seek exposure to volatility. And that's really what the 10% gets you, right? So now let's talk for a second about this model. Okay. And the way to think about this is I have wedding levels, and this is an opportunity cost model. So let's assume for a second your baseline is you could do it as cheaply as $10,000. Like when you think about it, you're like, yeah, that would be a really low cost wedding, but you run the numbers, you and your spouse to be, you're like, we're not going to have many people. We're going to do it a lot of it during the week. We found ways to to kind of keep our costs down. So you think your baseline is 10,000. Now, what the way to interpret this model is every time you go up a level, it's sharing with you how much money you're giving up for retirement. So, for example, if you're at level one, which is 10,000, and you're going to basically go from 10,000, you're going to spend just $15,000 more to go to 25. If instead you invested that money for retirement, which again is you're 27 and retirement is at age 62, right? So that period of time, if you would invest that 15,000 instead, what you're giving up is almost $500,000. So that's the way to look at that. Okay. Now you can kind of play with these. You can look at these opportunity costs different ways. The most extreme one is if your baseline was 10,000 and you ended up spending 100,000, your opportunity cost for retirement is about $3 million. Okay. So, and again, you can, it's sort of a game of, figuring out what your baseline is, because that's where the sort of the trade starts. So you may, if you're for whatever reason, we're like, there's no way we could get below 25,000, that just means you're a level two. So you would start over here, right? And then if you went from level two to level three, it would cost you just shy of $1 million for retirement. And if you went from 25 to 100,000, which is level two to level four, it would cost you about $2.5 million for retirement. So again, this is just to help you understand the wedding decision as a personal finance decision with a long-term horizon as your kind of guiding principle, right? Is the way to look at that. Okay, so that's what this means. Now, the cool thing is for you, you can go in and play with this. Let's say you say, you know what, I think I can get 12%. Well, you can put that in and look what it does to the numbers. Massive difference, right? You went, look at what happened. Let's take the level one to level four. You went from 3 million, just adding 2% more. You went to almost 6 million, a massive difference. So that gives you an idea of the power of that yield. keeping it in a higher yielding account for a long period of time makes a massive difference, right? Now, let's say that you are going to get married sooner. So let's say you're 20 now, you find your forever partner, and you get married right after you graduate. So let's say you're 23, same age of retirement, right? Let's go back to the 10%. That makes a big difference. You've just added, all you did was add 4 more years, but you're adding 4 more years at the beginning of your life, right? So let's go back here again. Again, let's focus on this level 1 to level 4. So starting at 23, that'd be 4.3 million. But if you did how it was originally and started at 27, it's 3 million. Again, a big difference. And that goes down to when you're young, these differences make a big difference if you've got time, right? And so you basically went from about 40 to 45 years. But that makes a big difference. Now, it's sort of saying like delaying getting married. It might be a good thing if you're looking at it from a pure financial standpoint. I don't know that I really think about it like that, but you could interpret it that way. I just think what it's really saying is finding ways to keep your costs down, right? Keeping your opportunity cost baseline down, and staying within that. It's basically going to end up, if you take that money and instead of spending it on your wedding, you spend it on, and you invest it the way we talk about in quadrant 2, in the robo quadrant. This is going to be the outcome. Now, here's an interesting challenge, though. The interesting challenge is this: if your parents are funding this, you have to have that discussion with them. Maybe you say, I'd like to do it less expensively. They may be like, oh, that's great. But they may be like, actually, we'd like a more expensive wedding and we're willing to pay for it. Now, that's an interesting conversation because you could say, it's like, well, mom and dad, I'd rather you take that money and just put it into our inheritance. And maybe you help put our kids through college someday or something like that. It's an interesting discussion, right? And they would be so blown away, by the way, if you had that discussion with them and we're actually encouraging them to save money for your grandchildren or otherwise, creating this long-term view of money that could be spent today on a wedding, but instead we're going to put it towards retirement. And you can kind of show them this model and say, hey, we could actually create a ton of value together just by keeping our costs down. I think they would be like, wow, so glad you took that class at JMU. So anyway, that's the story with that. Okay. Any questions on the model? Does it make sense? I hope. Okay. So let's talk about now. I'm now going to, it's 1:30. I'm going to spend a little bit of time actually. So I want to talk a little bit now about next week. We're having our quiz. Okay. And the quiz is going to be on chapters 12 and 13, the home buying, as well as, what we went through today and with the event planning and wedding. Okay. Now, you're also working with your partner. You're also going to do the home buying assignment. And by the way, I have received a couple of requests from people that want to present. So I'm certainly keeping that in. If you want to present, if you'd like to get feedback from the realtors, which they're great people, very nice people. I recommend that you do want to do that. So let me know and I'll make sure that you get to present. If not, I'm basically just going to randomly choose you. We have about an hour for this. So, and usually we can get through about half of the class. Okay. So again, if I recommend it, if you want it, send me an email with you and your group, and I'll make sure that you're in the presentation queue. If not, it'll just be kind of randomly chosen. So everybody has to be ready, is the bottom line. Okay. So we're going to have that quiz next week. So We'll do the presentations first, then we'll do the quiz, then we're going to jump into the rest of the class. We're also going to have a quiz the week after that, okay, right before Thanksgiving. And the reason we're doing that is because it's kind of a weird thing with this class. Just one of the quizzes only covers 1 week of content. It's just because we have to have 7 quizzes and how many classes there are, we end up having that one class that only one quiz that only covers one class's content. So it'll be a little bit shorter, a little bit easier to study for, I think. So anyway, but the one that we're doing is called we're gonna change gears just a little bit, but we're gonna be focusing on how to overcome the AI, making the best decisions in our data saturated world. So that's going to be what we're going to cover at the end of class after we do our quiz next week. So we'll hit it for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to have a quiz on it the following week. Does that make sense to everyone? I know it's a little bit different, but I just wanted you to make sure you understood that. Okay. Certainly, if you don't, let me know. But it'll be, I'll be sending out that information in the emails. All right. So that is the story. What we're going to do now, we're going to be wrapping up in about 15 minutes. But before we wrap up, what I'm going to do is because we have so little time to talk about the AI topic next week, I'm going to go ahead and jump into that one now. We're going to basically, I'm going to spend about 10, 15 minutes on that now. And then we're going to start next week after the quiz, and then we'll basically jump in from there and basically finish out that topic. So we're going to just take a little bit of time now to introduce the AI topic, and then we will finish that up next week. All right. All right. So give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen. I think that's the one. All right. So our final, or not our final one, but the one I'm kicking off now that we will go into at the end of class next week is called The Impact of AI on Purchases plus the Pet Purchase. I think I mentioned this before, but this one is a little bit provocative because we're going to turn the pet purchase into a personal finance purchase. And for some people, Maddie included, who has a very nice doggy there, they may not like to think about a pet as a personal finance purchase. They love their pet, right? And they couldn't imagine thinking of them like, oh, well, how much money are they costing me? And should I make a decision based on how much money they're costing me? But I, but we're going to cover that anyway. So I would just ask you to suspend disbelief for a little while if it all bothers you. Don't worry, I'll get in trouble. You won't. And it's again, this is just something to think about. Okay. And I'm encouraging to consider this in terms of your pet purchase. So anyway, we're going to first talk about, this is really two sort of pieces here. We're going to start with the AI part of this, and then we're going to use the pet purchase to basically show you how the AI and the use of artificial intelligence in consumer platforms would impact a pet purchase or another purchase. But we're going to also share with our approach to making the best pet purchase for you. Okay. So our objectives are to explore how the AI may impact your purchases. And again, we're going to look at it more from the supply side. And again, if you think about it, definitive is a demand side model. It's on your side, right? The idea is it's helping you get clear about what's important to you. It helps you to evaluate your alternatives. But if you think about it, again, that's demand side. On the supply side, like if you think about like Amazon, for example, Amazon has a supply side decision-making capability. If you log into your Amazon app, and you search on something, the order in which it gives you those results, that's part of how they basically convince you to purchase certain things on Amazon. So all those, the way they present it, the default choices, what Amazon allows you to filter on, what it doesn't allow you to filter on. I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but I wish Amazon would let me filter or sort on cost per unit. Like if something is 16 ounces versus something is 20 ounces, well, I just really want to know how much per ounce is it, and I'll buy the cheapest one. They don't let you do that. I don't know why. At least the one that I look at. So anyway, little things like that. So it tells you there's certain things that they're going to let you search on or filter on. There's certain things that they're not going to let you, but all that is geared towards generally helping them optimize sales. Okay. All right. We're also going to discuss how data curation and decision process helps you overcome AI challenges. And again, AI meaning on the supply side, how they interact with you. Exploring personal models. And again, that's really the use of definitive and the, what I think we talked about earlier in the semester, the analytical approach called the analytical hierarchy process, or AHP. That is the demand side. That's to help us to overcome the supply side AI challenges. Then we'll discuss the pet purchase in the context and using the whole idea of human intelligence, which again is that personal model, applying it, using it with our definitive or your favorite decision-making capability. And then finally, we'll explore pets as the personal finance decision. Okay, and I'll show you the numbers on that. Kind of like what we just did with the wedding, but we'll be applying that to how much pets can actually cost you. All right, so that's the story. Let's go ahead. Do you ever believe AI is being leveraged to separate people from their hard-earned money? And we just walked through Amazon as an example, but there are definitely other examples. Netflix, if you've rented movies, bought movies, got shows, whenever you pay for something on Netflix, they're using what's called it's a Bayesian model. It's called the next purchase model, right? So what they do is say, hey, people that look like you typically rented or bought this next. And it's meant to be helpful, right? To say, hey, you just finished this show. Let's say you're some awesome show that you really love. Now you're in a show hole. It's like, oh my God, I wish there was another season. There's not another season. So, but I want to watch something else. Well, they're going to help you to know what to watch next. It benefits them certainly because it's keeping your eyeballs on Netflix. And if you're renting it, you're also going to be passing them additional money besides whatever you're paying to have your Netflix account. Okay. So that's basically the way it works. And personal models, what I'm calling here personal decision models, or your what's important to me, your criteria models, that's how you overcome it. Being clear about what's important to you is how you deal with AIs that are basically built around driving sales for the supplier today. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about data curation and the challenges of the consumer product marketing company's self-interest. Data can be noisy. Data may be intended to deceive, right? And I know I've talked about this. The January 9th commission, and what they focused and what their findings were, which is actually ironic now, right? Because Trump just got reelected. So whatever you think about what happened January 6th, enough Americans don't care. that people died as a result of of that event. But it is what it is. I'm not a particularly political person, but the bottom line is the findings were that information there was false information that very likely led to that event that ended up several people got killed, right? And that's horrible. Hopefully we can all agree on that. So anyway, so that's the point is that fake news, poorly curated information can lead to obscure truth-informing signals, and it can lead to disastrous outcomes. This is an extreme example in terms of sort of a political or situation where people died. But what I'm saying is basically if the government or your leaders are willing to do stuff like this, of course, so are Amazon and Netflix and any of the other big companies that are using this information to help guide your purchase decisions. And it's not always, and it's generally to benefit the company themselves, not necessarily with your benefits as a consumer in the front of their minds. Okay. All right. So it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of class when we talked about the many cognitive biases. There are our attention in our neurobiology really points to one of the core cognitive biases called confirmation bias. Okay, and this I'm basically not for next time, but for the time after the video I'm going to have you guys comment on and watch is called The Path for Bad Decisions and How to Avoid It. I'm going to get into the different kind of the reasoning errors, both the error of omission, which is basically where politicians or any company presents the benefits, but they don't necessarily present the things that might go against a positive decision for a purchase or for voting for a political candidate or whatever, right? So that's error of omission. And then error of commission is just basically fake news, right? It's an error. It means that they're saying something that's not true. In general, I mean, while politicians may do that more, what I find is the error of omission is a much more dangerous thing for a couple reasons. One is generally, like in the United States, false advertising is illegal, right? So if a company specifically makes a claim that is just fake, it's wrong, the FTC could basically sue them. And so that doesn't happen so much. But it's the error of omission that is actually the big challenge. It's what they're not telling you. It's what else you need to learn about making some purchase or whatever. So it's really that error of commission, or I'm sorry, that error of omission that you have to be on the lookout for. And the challenge is, of course, it's an omission. It's not there. It means you have to look far harder for it as an educated consumer. Okay. All right. So what does that lead to? There's a couple of best practices that come out of this. Practicing your data curation. I think we've talked a little bit about this. It's actually a good thing to buy your information. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product kind of thing. It's worth paying for something that you can trust is unbiased or it's a bias that you can understand and correct for, right? But that's the essence of data curation. And that's really some of the AI challenges is when data is not curated, but you take it as being appropriate, or you take it as basically informing a decision when it's either uncurated, it's wrong, and you could be omitting information. So as part of your life, practicing data curation is super critical to being, a successful consumer in today's world. And then practicing the best decision process, that goes back to, we've been focused on, tools like definitive choice, and we've been practicing that process. I wouldn't say you necessarily always have to use definitive choice. I think it's a good habit to get used to. But what happens over time is once you get good at these kind of decisions and the thinking of using, the process that we've been practicing over and over again in the class, you don't always have to use the app, which is nice. But I recommend, as a best practice, to get in the habit of using it, and then over time maybe you don't have to use it as much or whatever. But it's a great way to kind of keep the decision process in front of you, which is really cool because it's the same decision process for every decision. The details are different, but the decision process is incredibly consistent. It's incredibly consistent because of our neurobiology, right? It's because all of our brains basically operate. We're human beings. We all have about the same neurobiology, and the impact of cognitive biases is incredibly consistent as well. So anyway, that's why the decision process works so well across different kinds of people and across different kinds of decisions. Okay, so just since Gen AI is a kind of a new thing, and we've been using ChatGPT and other forms of Gen AI in our class, I've talked about some best practices about getting the most out of it. But I wanted to show it to you in a kind of a concise format. Okay. And I very much call this a partnership, right? In other words, you see the human there on the left, and you see sort of the Gen AI or the computer thing robot on the right, and they're shaking hands because they're partners. And in my view, that's the relationship that you should have with Gen AI. But just like any partnership, you have to understand how the Gen AI works and how to get the most out of your partnership. And so these are the 6 things that as I have increased my usage of Gen AI, both with Definitive, you saw how we use the AI called Oliver. That's our version of our Gen AI that we've implemented into our apps, but also using it, to assist me in my writing and other different ways. So anyway, so these are kind of the top 6 things that I've come to believe that really have assisted me. And I've tested this in a number of different ways. I've had interviews with different people, and these 6 things seem to be pretty consistent. So anyway, so I want to share them with you. So number 1 is define clear goals from the start, right? And remembering that the way to think about it is you're the arbiter of accuracy, right? But you're also the creator of bias. That's the Gen AI doesn't really deal in that space at all. So you have to set your goals. You have to set the target. What am I trying to achieve? The Gen AI doesn't do that. It doesn't know your goals. It doesn't even, it's not sentient in that way. It doesn't understand the whole notion of a goal, at least not yet. Okay. So you have to own that. So being really clear about those goals, that's on you. That's the dude on the left there, right? Is being clear about goals. And then provide context with your queries. Now, like when we were doing that before, I wrote up the query, telling the AI a little bit about you and what you're trying to achieve, like in a wedding, that actually helps a lot. It kind of gives it a starting point where to look, and that's quite helpful. Review the outputs for precision. So the Gen AI is a precision machine. It takes information, it can summarize it, it can predict what the right sort of the kind of words, if you're building a paper or otherwise trying to use it to do some research for you. But it's not perfect. And in fact, it's only about 80% perfect. So you always have to review the outputs. You have to own the accuracy part of it, but even in the precision side, it's better than nothing, but it's still not always completely precise. And so that's the telltale sign of a sloppy user of Gen AI is when you walk behind it and you say, oh, that's wrong. They obviously didn't, do the QC on this. So Anyway, next is curate credible information for the Gen AI. So, for example, if I'm using the Gen AI to help me write a paper or help me do research, I will feed it the specific research that I want it to consider. So I will go out and do some of my own research. Maybe I'll get a couple papers that are highly related to, the kind of paper that I want to write, or maybe I'll give it some of my older papers that I've already written, that I know are in line with exactly what I need and what I want, and from the accuracy standpoint. Well, I give that all to the Gen AI, right? So I give it a starting point. I give it kind of a box of here's all the data and information I want you to consider. Okay. The fifth one, which is I find to be really interesting that works, is you can ask the Gen AI too many questions in one, and the Gen AI can get confused. So like before, when I wrote out a prompt that was like 4 or 5 or 6 different questions, or giving it 4 or 5 or 6 different directions, what you're better off doing sometimes is just doing them one at a time. It's almost like, think of it as like a simple child. Give it, think of what all the things you want it to do, but only ask it one at a time. Say that I want you to do this, let it go do it. And then it'll come back with results, and you'll like it, you won't like it, you'll go in and get it to make some changes for you, and then ask it the next question. So do it iteratively. Iterative prompting makes a big difference. And I've just found that again with the QC thing on the back end. If I do iterative prompting, I'm much more likely to get the answer I want. And then finally, leverage Gen AI's strengths and consistency. It is pretty predictable in terms of the output it'll give you. And that's precision, right? That you kind of want it to do that. Even sometimes if it's consistently wrong, understanding where it's consistently wrong, you can solve for that, right? And it is incredibly consistent. It's incredibly precise. Again, going back to the difference between accuracy and precision, right? Accuracy is to a goal. Precision is basically doing the same thing over and over again, basically getting the same answer every time. So if you've got the wrong goal, but it's really precise, it's basically what you've gotten it to do is do the wrong thing really, 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 really well. And so anyway, but by being focused on that first one, by setting clear goals, you're going to be able to really take advantage of the consistency and the precision that Gen AI can provide for you. Okay. So anyway, I promised I was going to end a little bit early, and we are about 1:53 here. Let me do the wrap up, and then we will call it a day. So let me share the other PowerPoint. Give me 1 second, folks. Okay. So okay, so let's recap. So we did chapter 13 in the supplemental, the ultimate guide. Again, that article is similar to what you see in the book, but especially like the information about the research from the two researchers, that's relatively new, and there's some other things that are new. So anyway, so together those are the two main things that we'll need for the chapter 13 stuff. So we covered that today, especially the wedding venue and the class assignment. Be sure to update that, your result, and put it into the Canvas assignment to get credit for it. The out on in Canvas is the next video to watch, and that is Innovation in the Stove Burning Challenge. I think it's only about 5 minutes long, but very helpful in terms of understanding how to think about innovation and making changes, especially after you get into your career. Okay. Next week, we will have the home buying group assignment. Will be report out in class. That is next Friday. It'll be in class. We'll have 3 realtors there. It's going to be a fabulous opportunity, and it'll be. I think you're really going to like it. The realtors are wonderful, and they're going to give you lots of really great feedback. Okay. And then then after the quiz, which we'll do after we do the home buying assignment report out, we will continue on with our focus on AI in pet buying. Okay. All right. So that is all I have. I'm off to get my daughter married now. I'm pretty excited. So we will see you next Friday. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And y'all have a great day.
Congrats,
Yeah.
Professor.
Thank
Could
you.
I ask you a question real quick?
Of course.
I've been having issues with signing into my Google account through Canvas to leave comments on the YouTube videos.
Huh. Okay.
So, um, could I just go back and like leave my comment in the Canvas comment section?
Like the comment you would have left, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fine. I mean, I like it in there just because, the more people sort of make comments, the better people can kind of see the comments that are made or whatever. But yeah, no, obviously, if you're having trouble, that'll work to get credit.
Thank you.
And do you need me, Deacon? Well, the thing with it, I guess with definitive choice, if send me an email on what if you still have challenges, if you still can't get the login, there's one or two ways to handle that. One would be create another login, using a different email. And if that doesn't work, send me an email and I'll get my CTO to figure out what's going on.
I think it should work on my computer
Okay.
because it normally works when I'm on browser version, but
Got it.
on the app sometimes it gets weird.
And it's yeah. And to be fair, Deacon, we are iOS focused more to some degree. Google's a little bit of an afterthought.
Yeah, I'm definitely the odd one out with an Android.
Yeah. So anyway, so yes, if you can use the browser, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you
I hope
take.
the wedding goes well.
Yeah, thanks.
Congrats.
I appreciate it. We'll see you next week.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, Ellie. Are you still on?